China just made one decision that wiped out decades of progress, and their own economists are calling it catastrophic. Stay till the end, because this changes everything. China has the second largest economy on Earth. It built more infrastructure in 20 years than most countries do in a century. It lifted 800 million people out of poverty. By every measure, it looks unstoppable. But underneath that image of dominance, there are some serious cracks forming simultaneously. And some of them cannot be fixed. This isn't about politics. This is about math, demographics, and decisions that were made decades ago, whose consequences are arriving right now. To understand why, we need to go back to a single decision made in 1980. In 1980, China made a bet, a massive, irreversible, generational bet. The government told its people, one child per family. The goal was simple: control population, accelerate growth. For decades, it worked. Fewer mouths to feed meant faster development. China grew at 10% per year. The world was amazed. But here's what no one fully calculated. Every policy has a delayed price, and China is now receiving the bill. 40 years later, all at once. That one decision didn't just reshape families. It reshaped the entire foundation of China's economy, its workforce, its housing market, financial system, and political future. China's birth rate is now lower than Japan's. Let that sink in. Japan, the country the world has used as a warning symbol for demographic decline for 30 years, China has now surpassed it in the wrong direction. By 2050, roughly 400 million Chinese people will be over 60. The working population is already shrinking. The pension system will be supporting more retirees than it has workers to fund it. And the three-child policy introduced to reverse this? Young Chinese aren't interested. The cost of living is too high. The culture has already shifted, and the damage is done. But demographics alone don't collapse an economy overnight. What accelerates the fall is what China built its entire economy on top of. China built its economic growth on real estate. For decades, property was the investment of choice. Families poured their life savings into it. Developers borrowed endlessly to build more. Local governments depended on land sales to fund everything. The entire system was built on the assumption that prices would rise forever. Then something happened that no one expected. China's largest real estate company, Evergrande, collapsed. This is one of the biggest real estate disasters in the entire history of China. Millions of pre-sold apartments that were already paid but never built. And Evergrande wasn't the exception. It was the symbol of an entire industry built the same way. Real estate represents 25 to 30% of China's entire GDP. No major economy has ever had that level of concentration and survived its unwinding cleanly. Now add the demographic collapse from Section 1. Fewer young people means less housing demand. A bubble that was already cracking is now losing its last buyers. You might think, surely the government can step in and fix this, right? But here's the problem. The government itself is part of the crisis. In 2018, China abolished presidential term limits. Xi Jinping could now rule indefinitely. Around the same time, experienced technocrats, the economists and specialists who built China's growth, were quietly replaced by loyalists, people chosen not for their expertise, but for their obedience. Here's what that creates. A system where bad news doesn't travel upward, it gets buried. Remember COVID's early days? The doctors who raised the alarm were silenced. The world lost weeks of response time. That wasn't a glitch. That was the system working exactly as designed. No term limits means no correction mechanism. No succession plan means if Xi dies or becomes incapacitated tomorrow, there is no clear path forward. Just a power vacuum at the top of a nuclear-armed nation with a collapsing economy. That's not a risk. That's a loaded gun with no safety. And while China was tightening control at home, it was burning bridges everywhere else. China spent 40 years building global relationships, then spent the last 10 dismantling almost all of them. The new approach is called wolf warrior diplomacy. It has three core pillars: aggressive, confrontational, and proud. Ambassadors publicly insulting host countries, trade threats against anyone who questioned Beijing, and debt traps through the Belt and Road Initiative. The goal was to project strength. The result was to unify China's rivals. The US, the EU, Japan, Australia, India, Canada, all simultaneously cooled or severed key ties with China. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern, but it gets worse. Because the one force that could solve this, Chinese innovation, is being quietly suffocated from the inside. China produced some of the most successful tech companies on Earth. Then their own government kneecapped them. Alibaba, Tencent, Didi. These weren't just companies, they were proof that Chinese entrepreneurs could compete with Silicon Valley. Then starting around 2020, Beijing launched a crackdown. Fines, investigations, forced restructuring. It was the signal. The most talented, wealthy, educated Chinese citizens began leaving in record numbers. They call it lying flat. China is experiencing a brain drain at exactly the moment it needs brains the most. China's entire escape plan from middle-income stagnation depends on moving up the value chain through innovation. You cannot do that by scaring away the exact people who create innovation. It's the economic equivalent of cutting off your own hands and then wondering why you can't climb. Every single problem we just walked through, they all share one root cause. And it's not what you think. It's not Western pressure. It's not bad luck. It's not even poor planning. The root cause is this: the Chinese Communist Party has consistently chosen its own survival over the long-term health of the Chinese nation every single time, without exception. Think about it. The one-child policy wasn't about what was best for families. It was about making the economy look controllable. The real estate bubble wasn't accidental. Local governments needed land revenue to hit targets set by Beijing. The crackdown on entrepreneurs wasn't about fairness. It was about making sure no private citizen becomes powerful enough to challenge the party. The core paradox that makes this truly tragic is that the very actions the party takes to stay in power are the actions destroying China's future. Censorship kills innovation. Centralization kills good decision-making. Suppressing entrepreneurs kills the economy's next engine. Hiding bad debt makes the eventual crash worse. The party is not saving China. It is slowly consuming it to keep itself alive. China's story looks like an economic crisis, but what it actually is a masterclass in how power destroys itself. China is not a cautionary tale about communism, or about Asia, or even about authoritarianism specifically. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when any system, anywhere, confuses self-preservation with strength. The Roman Empire didn't fall because barbarians were strong. It fell because Rome stopped being able to look at itself honestly. The Soviet Union didn't collapse because America won. It collapsed because it could no longer afford the gap between its official story and its actual reality. China is not Rome. China is not the Soviet Union. It is bigger, more complex, and more interconnected with the world economy than either of those ever were. Which means if China falls, it won't just be China's problem. The smartest people in Beijing know everything we just discussed. They have the data. They have the analysts. They understand the demographic math. They see the debt numbers. The question was never whether they knew. The question is whether a system built to protect itself is even capable of saving itself. And history's answer to that question is not encouraging. So next time someone tells you China is the unstoppable future, ask them one question. What happens to a machine that was built to never admit it's broken?